Last week on Tech Tuesday we looked at tire pressure, and this week we're going to look at something that's almost just as important. Chain lube! Now, all bicycle chains and drivetrains need to be lubricated from time to time, and what you use is going to make a big difference on how that bike rides, and it's going to be a big part of the maintenance on that bike. If your chain is dry and squeaky, it's not just making annoying noises and making it harder to pedal, it's also causing a lot of premature wear to the rest of the drivetrain. So the gears, the cranks, all that, even your derailleur itself can take a lot of premature damage just from having a poorly lubricated or dry chain. So first things first, what do you use to lubricate your chain? Really, as long as it's a bike-specific chain lube, it doesn't really matter. What brand it is means nothing. There's WD-40 Bike, there's muc-off, there's a few other brands, but the one Cycle Path has exclusivity for is this one, Finish Line. Finish Line makes great products. I'd really recommend any of their lubricants, and for the most part we use these two. For rough conditions, we use the wet lube. For good conditions, we use the dry lube. These do come in smaller bottles. I'm just using the big ones to show you what the packages look like. Basically, this wet lube is a lot stickier. It's going to give a lot better protection from rust and salt and water and things like that, but it being sticky, it's going to work dirt into it, so the drivetrain's going to have to be cleaned more frequently. And this stuff, the dry lube, is kind of the opposite. This stuff gives you adequate protection, just not quite as much as the wet lube, but this stuff is much cleaner. Dirt doesn't stick to it, it doesn't get worked into the chain in the same way, so you don't develop that black sludge that builds up after a year or two. So for the most part, if you're riding in rough conditions, you're going to use a wet lubricant, and if you're riding in good conditions, you're going to use a dry lubricant. Next part is actually how to apply the lube. Lubricating a dirty drivetrain or over-lubricating a drivetrain is almost as bad as running it dry. Lubricating a dirty drivetrain is just going to work that dirt further into the drivetrain and effectively wet sand the chain from the inside out. And over-lubricating is going to have a similar effect where it's going to pick up a lot more dirt than it otherwise should and develop that black sludge, which is again going to prematurely wear your drivetrain. So whether you're using a dry or a wet lube, the trick is to get it at the sides of the rollers so it can seep in between them instead of putting it directly on the center of the chain. You get it here just in the cracks where the rollers are, right there, that'll do the trick. So with the chain on the bike, you run through like that, put it across the whole chain, you let it soak in for maybe 30 seconds, and you take a rag and wipe off all the excess. You can do this while it's on the bike. You just wrap the cloth around the chain and pedal backwards. And once it's mostly clean and dry to the touch, you're all good to go. The chain's gonna hold the lubricant that it needs inside its rollers. So, quick recap. If you're riding in rough conditions, use a wet lubricant. If you're riding in good conditions, use a dry lubricant. Try and get it inside the chain as much as possible, then wipe off all the excess, and that's gonna keep your bike running the way it should for as long as possible.